food sensitivity tests have been the bane of my existence and your existence, I think, for so long. So I'm like, let's just talk about it. Let's get it all on the table. Let's talk about if we recommend it. Is it even helpful in any scenario? The testing itself, and then also food sensitivities in general, because a lot of our clients come to us with food sensitivities. And my perspective, which is really controversial sometimes, is they're not real. And I don't mean that symptoms aren't real. I'm not denying that you eat something and you feel terrible. But what I mean is that the food sensitivities are often a symptom of something else. And so I want to unpack that and talk about it a bit, just so that people feel like they have tools. It's not, I can't eat bread for the rest of my life, or now I can't eat almonds and I can't eat this. Because, you know, you and I are both moms. And how important is it that when our kids are like, hey, you want to go get ice cream? That we're like, hell yeah, I want to get ice cream.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
I think it's so big as a mom to be able to eat what your kids are eating, or eat pizza at a birthday party.
Yeah.
You know, things like that. It's not only stressful when you're avoiding foods, but that really leaks into the mental health aspect of it all. And if you're struggling with gut issues, your mental health is already probably depleted. You know, it's altered in some way. And then you add another layer of, okay, now I have to really be aware of what foods are available and what I can eat. And do I need to pack my food? And it's just this unnecessary thing that we as moms do not need in any way.
Right. It also keeps you, it like creates like a vicious cycle for a lot of my clients too, where it's like we're stressed about the foods that we can or can't tolerate. And then going into those foods, like, it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy sometimes. Like if we think that we're not going to tolerate it, it's only going to create an opportunity for our digestion to already be poor before the food has even entered our body. And then we have a poor reaction. And it's like, see, I knew it was that food. I shouldn't have done that. It just creates you stuck in this cycle.
Absolutely. And that's something we work with clients a lot on that I think is missed by so many practitioners, because the way that I see this playing out with functional providers is the first appointment, they're like, okay, no dairy, no gluten, no seed oils, no sugar, no everything. And you're left with like, oh my gosh, now I have to figure out what to feed myself, but then I also have to cook something different for my family. And what does that look like? Or I can't go out to eat now because I'm sure they're using seed oils. And so that's kind of where functional medicine in general starts, I find. And again, super damaging. And they're not asking, why is your body reacting to a food? They're looking at, okay, you don't feel good when you eat X. That means you can't tolerate it. And the way that we see it is, why is your body not tolerating the food? And I talk about this again. I'm like on this mom kick right now. I have like motherhood on the brain, I guess. You know, when you think about women's bodies and what it can do, like you recently had your second baby, you know, it's
Literally.
like you grow a human, you keep it alive despite throwing up every day and getting no sleep. And
no sleep.
Exactly. And then you pop them out and you keep them alive. Like for me, my first baby was a C-section. I was literally splayed open on a table. And then I just kept my baby alive.
You're recovering and then somehow you like create the milk that they need to survive. We're doing this crazy evolutionary thing just without even putting any energy into it. We're designed to do that. But then I can't eat a piece of toast for breakfast because my gut is like, it's too sensitive for that.
Your body is insanely resilient. And that's, of course, a word that comes up a lot with us and our clients too, is resiliency. And often that is what's lost when they're reacting to a bunch of foods, is your body has lost resiliency, whether that's from a microbiome standpoint, maybe you don't have enough good bacteria, maybe it's a nutrient standpoint. Do you have some low-level deficiencies that haven't been caught by anyone else? And again, a huge difference in how we practice is we look at those things. We look at nutrients in this and we say, well, of course your gut cannot heal. You don't have enough nutrients. It can't create healthy tissue if it doesn't have the ingredients it needs to create healthy tissue and heal. And these protocols that people are on are damaging to a nutrient status as well. So food elimination diets, you're eliminating a bunch of foods. And honestly, I had this conversation with a client the other day and she was like, oh, I've never thought about that. Eliminating gluten alone can create so many issues and low-level deficiencies with nutrients because so many foods are fortified. A lot of the gluten-containing products are fortified, which helps you get the adequate levels that you need. So when you take that out, you can get it in other foods, absolutely. But you have to be strategic about it. It's not as simple as passively getting it in something that was enriched. And so eliminating foods, again, you're eliminating a lot of nutrients, but then you're doing all of these detoxes and cleanses, and you're taking charcoal and other binders to help detox your body. Well, it's also binding nutrients, which then you're pooping out instead of absorbing. Right. What do you find? I mean, what do you see in clients who've been on long-term restrictive diets? Is there a pattern you see in their mental health or nutrient status or anything like that?
I'd say one of the most common patterns that comes to mind is that, I guess I'm on like the resiliency train, but just the pattern of client that I'll see is somebody who comes in, they did a food sensitivity test, they're avoiding all these foods, or maybe they're following low FODMAP, and then they're trying to reintroduce these things in, but they cannot. So they are just on this more and more. They're adding foods to the list of things that they can't tolerate. And then they get to a place where they're literally only eating like maybe a handful, a dozen or so, like safe foods. And that's where I see kind of that cascade of like, well, now we're nutritionally depleted. And that's obvious in the sense that we're super fatigued. People have no energy. They can't do things that they used to do, they used to enjoy. I'll see people who say they used to have this really active lifestyle. They used to go to the gym. They can't even get outside or get out on a walk anymore. They can't do the things that they used to do moving their body because they are so depleted that they can't recover and they just don't have the energy to even get out the door. So I would say fatigue is probably one of the biggest things I notice, other than just these ongoing and lengthening lists of foods that they can't tolerate. And then just more significant like gut issues. Like the thing that you're supposed to be resolving with the elimination is only getting worse the further into this you go. And I just think that a lot of that comes back to the fact that we need to be eating enough calories. You need to be getting enough micros and macronutrients in order to give your body initial safety to run the digestive process. And then we're impacting hormone production and enzyme production. Thyroid can slow down. That can slow down the gut. Like we're creating other issues by allowing these nutrient gaps to widen and widen and widen just from this ongoing elimination. And then you're stuck because you can't add them back in. And you just kind of, again, another vicious cycle with these ongoing symptoms. What about you? What do you see?
I think that's so similar, to what I see. And again, it's decades of this. And every practitioner is like, oh, well, you've eliminated dairy and you've eliminated gluten, but you haven't eliminated lectins yet. And you haven't eliminated this. It must be a food that you're intolerant to. And they feel stuck and it creates this food fear that is, then we have to retrain and help them feel safe around the food again. And it's just so challenging. And I had in our the mentorship program, in our call yesterday, it was a case study call. And we were talking about one of my clients who, was down to maybe 20, 30 safe foods. And he was terrified because he said, either one bit the dust. I had another one that I started to react to. And that's that cascade, right? But he was packing his food for get-togethers. He was packing his food on work trips. Hadn't been to a restaurant with his wife in forever. And by the time we wrapped up, I remember him messaging, he got this big award at his job and they went on this trip. And he said he went out to dinner with his wife. They ordered a breaded and fried appetizer. He ordered a pasta dish, like
these are my favorite
creamy pasta dish. And they got dessert and he had zero gut symptoms. And I'm like, that's how it should be.
When you look at us, we're two types of functional dietitians that kind of approach this a little bit differently. Nothing excites me more than when a client messages me and was like, I was able to have pizza with my husband, or I was able to eat Christmas dinner like a normal person. Those make me so genuinely happy because that's the stuff that like, there's an aspect of healing that I think functional medicine misses, where just living your life and finding joy in the small moments and creating and living with your community and enjoying social settings. Like functional medicine speaks to those things, but we don't always, I would say, practice that because there's so much restriction in the mainstream functional approach. And it's just impossible to enjoy social settings and have just innocent fun when food is everywhere and you are prohibited from eating so many things. So it just, it doesn't align, creates another layer of trouble in this cycle of trying to break out of these symptoms.
100%. And so I want to back up a little bit because I hope at this point people are like, oh my God, that's me. Oh my gosh, yep, that's me. That's me.
Right.
So hopefully you feel heard and understood and like we get it because we see this every day. But I want to back up to the food sensitivity test in general. So generally with a food sensitivity test, it's measuring the type of antibody called an IgA antibody. Even immunologists, the people who understand immunology and antibodies, that is their whole life is studying the immune system and its response to things. They do not accept food sensitivity testing as anything that is helpful at all. And I think we're in this world, we're in this culture that's like, oh, of course the doctors are going to say that because they're paid off by... Absolutely not. At a certain point, you can't continue to lean on that and say, everyone in the entire health system must be wrong. It's just not how it works. And so, we just don't have any evidence at all that this is a helpful test in general. What the food sensitivity test companies say is that if you get an IgA reaction, an antibody against a particular food, it's your body saying, hey, I don't like this. Let's not eat it. We cannot tolerate it. But the research actually shows that it might be flagging for tolerance. We don't even know if that test itself is saying, hey, we can't tolerate this, or hey, we've seen this before, so we're going to tag it. So if we see it again, we remember that it's a familiar thing, which is something that the immune system does. It's why we don't react to every little thing that comes in our body. It's constantly saying, are you safe? Are you an enemy? Do we need to flag you to die?
Tagging,
or like,
constantly.
What do we need to do? So the testing itself is not anything that's validated. And I do want to make a clarification too between IgE and an IgA antibody test, right? So IgE is a true allergy. That is, you go to your allergist, you do the skin prick test, or maybe they're looking at IgE. That's not what we're talking about. If you have an allergic IgE response to almonds, we're not trying to undo that. It's not anything that has a deeper root cause. It's just like, well, sorry, you can't eat almonds. I don't know.
Sorry, and that's based on that tag. Like that type of tag is more of a like severe hypersensitivity reaction or allergic reaction.
100%. So I want to be clear again about what we're talking about and what we're not talking about. But let's assume, so we've already talked about the test itself, probably not the most accurate, but let's assume that it was accurate. Let's say that it did come back with foods and you eliminated them and you said, I feel so much better. I have a lot of thoughts on this. So number one, for a lot of clients, they say, what's so weird is I took this test and it came back with lobster and turmeric and almonds and blah, blah, blah. And they're like, what's so weird is that I ate that the night before. And I'm like, well, that's not weird. That's actually just a sign that, it's really just pulling from the newly tagged things.
Yeah. Or the things that it sees most often. I'll have clients similarly be like, these are all of my favorite foods. I eat all these things all the time. And again, that just speaks to, okay, it's just tagging to say, we've seen this. We know what this is. Doesn't necessarily mean it's this big, scary immune reaction response.
Exactly. When you get a test back and maybe there was 20 foods that came back and you did eliminate them and you're like, Brittany, I understand what you're saying, but I think you're wrong because I feel so much better. This is what I see generally. I'm never going to argue that you feel great. I love that you feel better, actually. I love it. But does your gut feel better, but your mental health now is not better? Now that's suffering? Because again, there's different definitions of what that looks like. But when you think about what you have to do in order to eliminate 20 different foods, you have to plan ahead. You have to be more intentional about what you're eating. You're likely going to avoid restaurants because you don't know what's going to be in the food. So you're eating at home more. You're finding new recipes, which may be more aligned with the health status that you're wanting. So there's so many things like confounding variables, right? Is what we talk about, in that maybe what you're feeling good about is just generally eating more wholesome foods, generally being more calculated with I eat breakfast and lunch and dinner now, or maybe that wasn't happening before. So there's a lot of things involved with that. But I also want to talk about, let's say that your body is reacting to a specific food for real, outside of testing.
Right.
Every time you eat gluten, you feel like garbage. Okay, well, number one, let's rule out celiac disease. Like, let's rule out things that might actually be a concern. But outside of that, there's a lot of other reasons why your body might be reacting to food. And I don't know your thoughts, but I have roughly 5 written down here in my notes that we can kind of talk through that I think can be helpful to see, oh, there might be a deeper issue here.
There's just so many things that could be going on. And to just say, like, I think gluten's a tricky one too, because it is such a hot topic. But just taking that at face value and saying, oh, I can't tolerate gluten, and just removing that, it puts the cart before the horse, if that is a saying that makes sense here. Like, it just feels like jumping to conclusions before we really know what could be going on. Because I always explain digestion as like a top-down process, and every phase of the digestive system plays a role. And there's different places along that journey where we could be having these problems arise. And that's really where more of that reactivity is coming from, not the food itself. It's the stops along the GI tract that really need more support.
Absolutely. What do you see as like the number one root cause generally for food sensitivities? Like, what's the first thing that comes to mind for you?
I will see, there's like 2 clients that I see most often. I have quite a few clients who have a pretty significant history of like reflux and maybe like long PPI use, antacid use to kind of cope with that. And then they end up having all of these downstream issues with food reactions. And that's a scenario where I'm thinking more like we've got some impaired digestive capacity, and our defense system in the stomach is creating the potential for downstream issues to be more prominent when it comes to like the digestive process and reactivity to foods. So that's one thing that I will see, like impaired digestive capacity, particularly in the stomach related to stomach acid. And then I will also see clients who have more of a dysbiosis or increased intestinal permeability, the leaky gut scenario, where they have developed these issues over time, and maybe they've had some history with antibiotics usage, or maybe they have long-term IBS and they've just been avoiding foods for a while. But if we provide some initial support to heal the gut lining, make that a more robust barrier where we're able to secrete the amount of brush border enzymes that we need to kind of break food down properly so it gets to the colon and it's not fermenting, people will have an improved food tolerance over time. And I think that that's something that people can have happen when you have these food avoidances for a while and then you bring them back in. You're like, just given the body has kind of allowed itself to do that process on its own without needing a bunch of external inputs. And then you're able to tolerate those foods again. But some people need a little bit more targeted nutrient, supplemental or antimicrobial support to make that happen. So those are kind of the 2 clients I think of the most. What about you?
Yeah, I think those are definitely probably the top ones as well. And I just want to bring that point home a little bit more. So the decreased digestive capacity that you were talking about, that's so big. This would be if you feel like your food reactions are within minutes of eating. You feel like 10 minutes in, you feel like food's sitting like a brick in your stomach. You feel a lot of distension and gas. You feel extra full from a couple bites of food. That could mean that your stomach isn't quite doing what it needs to. You don't have enough stomach acid. You're not making enough enzymes for whatever reason. Food is sitting there too long. So what you're seeing as a food reaction actually has literally nothing to do with food. It has everything to do with the digestive juices or the enzymes just not functioning properly or not being optimal. So again, there's a root cause to that to that food reaction. And that's what we do as practitioners is say, what is your reaction that you're having? Why do you think you're intolerant? Because those symptoms tell us really closely what might be going on. And we look at timing. And then again, we target that issue. And then people are shocked that they can eat all the foods again. It's not, this slow process where let's try to add gluten back and we wait 3 weeks. And then we try to add this back and wait 3 weeks. It's like, hey, you can eat whatever you want. And then they realize, oh yeah, I'm not having any issues. I can tolerate everything now. And it kind of comes in one fell swoop, it seems. I will say that gluten and dairy are the 2 biggest first issues that we see. If you're going to react to a food, generally dairy and gluten are going to be the first ones, just because of the size of the protein is irritating, not because on their own they're harmful for us to have. It really just has to do with, again, the size of the protein. So generally I see those as the first two things that people can't tolerate, and they're usually the last to add back in fully. So sometimes clients are like, well, I was able to eat, one piece of bread and that worked fine. But then I also had pasta in the evening and that seemed to really do it. And so that's what that newly healed gut looks like, is you can have this much, but maybe not that much. And then as time goes on and you're further away in that healing journey, you recognize that, oh yeah, I forgot I used to not be able to eat pizza and now I eat it and I'm totally fine. And I had a salad next to it and that was fine as well. So that's that decreased digestive capacity piece. The other one you mentioned was like a dysbiosis picture. So dysbiosis is an imbalance of good and bad bacteria. So maybe it's a decrease in good bacteria or it's an increase in bad bacteria. And that can create unnecessary gases. So if your food sensitivity symptoms are more delayed, if it's several hours, maybe it's not happening until after lunch, maybe it's not really happening until after dinner. You feel like you're reacting to everything you put in your mouth at dinner, but breakfast is okay. It might be more of a colon issue, which is much lower down the line. And with that, the elevated bad bacteria can create excess fermentation and gas from the food. So again, it doesn't necessarily mean that you can't have high FODMAP foods even. It just means that those are very fermentable. So you couple a highly fermentable food with an overgrowth of bad bacteria, you get an excess of gas production that feels really uncomfortable. And then you take the low good bacteria, and that creates a lot of issues with the gut barrier itself. That creates issues with the intestinal lining. And another thing you mentioned was intestinal permeability. So leaky gut is a term that you've probably heard, you as in the listener. Of course, you've heard of it, Olivia, but this is increased gut permeability. And basically what that means is, when you think of the cells in the gut lining, just do like a little demonstration here, they should be really nice and tight. They should be stacking up, really well. What can happen is if the integrity of your gut lining is altered, that could be not enough good bacteria, nutrient status, like you mentioned, not enough nutrients to heal and repair, they start to kind of pull apart. And then you have things that can leak through those cells and be absorbed into the bloodstream where the immune system mounts an attack. If this is the case, this is typically the client that has like 50 foods they were intolerant to because everything is leaking out and triggering the immune system. This is the client that you feel like you have systemic symptoms. So you wake up and you feel really puffy and really stiff. You have a lot of joint pain, fatigue, brain fog. And just all of those full body symptoms, headaches, acne, like all of those things can be linked to that increased gut permeability. So I think that's a big thing. Another thing along those lines, SIBO kind of fits with the dysbiosis picture. So SIBO is just an overgrowth of bacteria in the small intestine. So you can have an overgrowth of bacteria in various parts of the GI tract, and they all present slightly different. But SIBO is a big one because not only do you have, that is something that you will react to everything, even water. You take a sip of water and you're like, I feel miserable. Well, it's not because you're intolerant to water. It's because there's clearly a deeper issue that needs to be addressed there. And so SIBO, again, I mentioned water triggering. If you're like, oh, do I have SIBO? You would have very extreme bloating and distension. That's the clients who are like, I look 6 months pregnant. It is hard and it hurts. And for me, that was my own journey. I had SIBO and it changed everything about my personality. I had back acne, which I'd never had in my life, anxiety and depression. I couldn't tolerate anything. I couldn't tolerate water, fatigue. I was so irritable. I could not focus at work. I couldn't even respond to an email. Like it was really, SIBO is a rough journey. Unfortunately, one of those things that we see, it doesn't resolve on its own. It doesn't resolve with just eating better and working out. You do have to hire someone who understands what they're talking about so you can actually get the SIBO. But I think that's a big one. Histamine MCAS. This is very trendy right now on Instagram. I don't know if that's your algorithm or if it's just the universe, like if it's just everywhere. I don't know. Do you see a lot of that?
I see it a lot. I feel like it is. People are just, and this is kind of similar. Like a few years ago, food sensitivity tests were like the thing. And then it just kind of, we expand, move the goalposts a little bit. It's not this, it's that. It's not that, it's this. And that's where I kind of find histamine issues falling. And I think, again, there could be, we talk a lot about pattern recognition. Like we're looking for patterns with the foods that you're reacting to. We're looking for patterns with the timing, how it feels, where it shows up in your abdomen to kind of get clues. And sometimes there are clues with histamine containing foods that do kind of fall in one category. But again, it's not its own silo. It's not like, okay, I have this, I labeled it. Now I'm just going to package it up and put it in the closet. Like, no, a lot of times there's still, like if we take steps back, the approach to actually address that is the same that we would be doing for just general food reactions, but it just doesn't have, that common name or that common thread that makes them all the same. It's very similar to like low FODMAP and having people react better to that. It's not that you just can't tolerate FODMAPs. It's that the body, the gut itself needs some support so that it can tolerate those FODMAP foods. And the same goes with histamine foods for most individuals.
And it definitely overlaps with SIBO, I see as well. So anything that damages the small intestine, we see an uptick in your reactions to histamine-containing foods.
Right.
So just because you feel better on a low histamine diet, that's just the start. That's just just you nailed a symptom, which is part of the bigger story of what's going on and what's the root cause. So I might have somebody eliminate histamine foods, but I do it as a test more than anything, because to test for histamine intolerance we don't have a good way to test. You can test histamine in the blood. It's not particularly accurate unless you're in the middle of a flare, which is hard to catch. Sometimes just eliminating it and seeing how you feel can be helpful, which again, it just is that piece of the puzzle. Also, if you're
points
somebody
us in the right direction, it's not the end all be all. Just point us in the direction that we need to go.
It's a puzzle piece of the greater puzzle.
Yeah, exactly.
Also, we've mentioned FODMAPs a couple times. Another kind of test, we were talking about SIBO, is if you do a low FODMAP diet and all of your problems go away, it's usually a pretty good indicator that you do have SIBO, which again is something that will not go away on its own. It will not resolve with a low FODMAP diet, which is why you can't add any of those foods back in. It's because you're not actually fixing the issue. Every time I talk about root cause, or it's a symptom, not a root cause, I always think of the analogy of a tack on the bottom of someone's foot. Like somebody has stepped on a tack, and they're like, my foot really hurts. Like, what's going on, right? The foot hurting is the symptom. And somebody looking at it and saying, oh, yep, there's a tack on the bottom of your foot. We'll just give you some ibuprofen. And it's like, well, that will take away the pain, but you're going to have to continue to take ibuprofen until you actually remove the tack. So that's how I see low FODMAP diets, low histamine diets, food elimination diets. How I see it is it's literally like giving you ibuprofen while there's a tack sitting, in the middle of your foot.
But it's a great analogy. And I think like bringing it back to food sensitivity tests, those they bypass all of these more like in-depth or time-consuming strategies that do the same thing. And a FODMAP diet, an elimination diet, a low histamine diet, it's just an elimination to see what resolves. And a food sensitivity test just bypasses that, but it just gives you another Band-Aid solution. It's not actually telling you these are the root of your issue, like avoid these and you're good. So I think that's another thing that trips people up is you get this like clinical report, put stock into it. It's got to be, more beneficial than doing like an elimination, but it's still giving you the same type of information. Like it's just a temporary Band-Aid solution. It's not actually telling us what's going wrong at any of those steps of the digestive process.
Right. Yeah. So I think we've covered most of the root causes that we see of food sensitivities. We talked about dysbiosis, SIBO. We talked about increased gut permeability, decreased digestive capacity, histamine MCAS. And then I think the final one that I see is what you alluded to right in the very beginning of the conversation was like the nervous system learned response. And again, this is overlooked by so many. A lot of people don't realize you can be almost creating gut symptoms through a food fear. So if you think that you are intolerant to broccoli, then every time you eat broccoli, you're going to be anticipating a response. You're going to be upregulating the nervous system. You're a little bit nervous. You're a little bit on edge. You're constantly checking for bloating. Like, am I bloated now? Wait, am I bloated now?
Right.
And just anticipating it. The stress and the anticipation alone can create the symptom. I have some clients who argue with me a little bit about, they're like, no way, that's not real. Like you can't, let me explain, right? So I think I tell the story about when I was in college, I literally almost died from some illness. I don't know what it was. I think I was on death's door. And the night before I had gotten that really terrible illness, it wasn't food poisoning, but the night before I had had eggplant parmesan and spaghetti squash.
Mm.
To this day, I cannot eat eggplant or spaghetti squash without feeling nauseous. And it has nothing to do with the food or true intolerance. It's literally your body trying to keep you alive. It's like, hey, idiot, do you remember last time you ate that? You almost died. It's the equivalent of when, we were hunter-gatherers and we ate a berry which made us sick. Our body is designed to say, ooh, that berry, it's already feeling nauseous just seeing the berry. I don't want that berry, just thinking about it. So it's something that has kept us alive, and it's good if we were still gathering berry, but it is a real response that, again, we work with our clients on helping them feel safe around the food and reconditioning their response to food. And nobody really believes us. Like, I know my clients don't really believe that it's going to help until they actually see the results and they're like, oh my, like I didn't have any reaction to the broccoli. And I'm like, I know. Yes, I know.
And I explain that to clients all the time. I'm like, okay, meal hygiene, and even thinking about it sometimes it's helpful for people to think like one step below, because I kind of think like brain is the top, the next step is the mouth. Okay, if you're not quite bought into the impact of just shifting into a positive mindset around your tolerance, then thinking about properly chewing, breaking down those foods, slowing down at meals, and really giving your digestion like a jump start by improving that first stop in the mouth. And that sometimes is enough for people to really be like, wow, I actually tolerated things a lot better. I had less reactions after my meal just by focusing on something that they can maybe more tangible as far as the meal hygiene or eating environment concept goes.
Yeah, I think that's perfect. I'm glad you took it there, because that is the first step I take with clients who are reacting to food, whether it's any of the things that we just listed as a root cause. We do start here. And again, maybe write this down if you're somewhere where you can write down. When you sit down to eat, it's getting yourself in a very relaxed state. So taking 3 deep breaths, getting yourself into rest and digest mode before you start chomping down, right? Then with every bite, you're going slow. You're chewing to an applesauce consistency. And again, you're slowing down. You're putting your fork down between bites. You're leaning back in your chair to help you just naturally slow down. That alone might solve all of your food sensitivities. And it's free. So that's cool.
And you can start it the next meal. You don't have to wait for a test to come in to confirm. Like, you don't have to do it. Literally start it the next time you eat. That's what I tell my clients. Like, this is great because you can literally start this today. Yes. And it makes such a big difference. And it does pull in that nervous system component without making it feel like all the kind of woo-woo, like, oh, I've got to shift into this mode. Just literally slowing down, being more mindful, and enjoying that meal, and see how much that resolves before we resort to all of these more convoluted and in-depth and expensive, depending on who you're going to, testing that's not really going to provide you any answers anyway.
And I think that works nicely, because the last thing I wanted to talk about was just general advice. If you're listening to this thus far, I imagine you're struggling with some of these symptoms and with food sensitivities. And so what we just talked about is step number 1 that I would recommend. It's eating environment, breathe, chew, all of those things, and see what that resolves. If you have not had a food sensitivity test and you are thinking about it, I would not waste a penny. Even if it was $1, I still would not do it. It's nothing that's super helpful. If you've already had one and you have currently eliminated all the foods and you can't add them back in, or you haven't had a test and you feel like you are reacting to all the foods, that's when you work with our team, right? And we will help
Right.
you nail down what your actual root cause is. I also have a root cause quiz that people can take that will help them kind of nail down what category, what bucket are you in? And it gives you some
Yeah.
starting points. So, maybe you have decreased digestive capacity. Here are 5 things you can start with, see where that gets you. And then if you get stuck, that's when you hop on a call with me and you say, hey, do you think you can help? Because gut issues, as you can tell from this conversation, are so nuanced and they are so complex. And that's why people stay stuck for decades, because it's nearly impossible to do it on your own if this isn't something that you went to school for. And I don't mean that to discourage people. I do want people to try things on their own. But when you get
Absolutely.
stuck, you have to know when it's time to hire a professional, because we can streamline it. We can make it simple and find you healing in literally 4 months, which is the average time clients spend with us, where you would still be spinning your wheels 2 years later, what would have taken us 4 months to solve. So
Yeah.
if you're interested in that, I'll have a link below as well. And just so you can learn about, what it looks like to work with us. You can hear from testimonials from people who've worked with us, have some more details. And then if you are interested, you just apply. So you fill out an application. Then from there, you're redirected to set up a 30-minute video call with me, where again, we just make sure that you're a really good fit for us. I'm very upfront if we're not a good fit, but we're a good fit for the right type of client. And so we just get to have that conversation, talk about details, and then you can onboard with one of us and we can get you healing, which is the ultimate goal. So I hope this is helpful. If you have any questions about it or anything that we spoke about, or you're like, that didn't make sense, or if you want to argue with us, drop it in the comments. I'd love to hear just any thoughts, questions, what wasn't clear, because it's always so fun for us to hop on and chat. And we want to talk about what is confusing to you. We want to demystify gut issues and make it feel like an achievable thing. And because healing is possible, you just have to find the right practitioner.